How are you, Steve? Okay, pal?
Am I on mute or can you hear me, boys?
I can hear you, mate. Can you hear us?
Yeah, all clear. All clear. How are we? All good?
All good, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad, mate. 1 sec.
But I thought you were stripping off there, Steve.
What's going on?
Get your muscles out. How long have we got you for, Steve? 30 minutes, 40 minutes?
Yeah, Sam, just crack on. Where are you, Rob? Are you over in India or?
India, mate, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can't you tell by my red face? I'm fucking boiling hot today.
Just thought you might be at home. I can see a gym post there in the background.
No, that's just it. I mean, they'll probably stick them on the top of the car, can't I? The dice, the rolly dice.
Yeah. Where's your Puma Kings and that?
Oh, they've well gone, mate. I'm a Nike man now, aren't I?
Oh, yeah.
Steve, you know, after the give us 30, 40 minutes, and if you're bored and you want to go, just stick your hand up or just change, and we'll just get you off there.
Just go to the bottom right corner.
I know, yeah. Just do that. That might be better.
No, listen, what are we on now? 1:15. I've got something on at 3, so I've got 45 minutes there to get done.
Fantastic, Steve.
Yeah, all right, mate. Well, listen, can we start then, Steve? Yeah, so obviously thanks for joining us, mate, and obviously pleasure. We've had some unbelievable good guests on. We've had Jürgen, we've had Sir King Kenny, and obviously yourself, so all proper Liverpool legends. We just wanted to get you some highs, some lows, and just to generally get a good feel of how you're enjoying management, you know, how you've evolved in the 3 years at Rangers, and the difference between, you know, going from under 18 level straight into the adult world, if you like. Okay.
Well, that's good company. I've obviously kept an eye on the first few and had a little look into them as well. They were really good, but it's good to be in good company. So yeah, fire ahead. Go on. I'm all yours.
Yeah, let's just start there, Stephen. Obviously, I saw you in Dubai, January of last year. Rangers Football Club, massive club. Graham's already given me a telling off as just how big the football club is. How is it all going? How do you feel you have, just to pick up on what Robbie said there, how do you feel you have evolved as a man, as a manager since going up north of the border?
Well, first and foremost, you're right. It is a massive club, obviously. Like a lot of people down south, you look at the old firm clubs from afar and you realise the two individually really big clubs, and you hear a lot about the old firm. You watch a lot of games on the TV. You realise they've both got incredible fan bases. But until you're actually in this, in terms of being in this position and you're working for the club, you really realise the intensity and the magnitude of the club, the following it's got. And you obviously get a big feel for the pressurised environment that we're working under. I'm really enjoying the journey so far. We're obviously in a fantastic place, sitting here right now. That hasn't always been the case. It has been a journey and a process. We've had some lows and some tough days along the way as well. But I think you have to sometimes go through them days to grow and evolve, especially being a new group together. But I think we're around 31, 32 months into the job now, and we've obviously improved an awful lot, and now we've got to go and try and finish the season as strong as we can to make sure that this season and the journey so far becomes a success.
Steve, was you aware of how? I know you just mentioned before how big the old firm teams are. Was you aware of just how big they were, or once you got in the door, did you realise they were actually bigger than what you envisaged, or?
Well, I'll take you back to when I played for Liverpool, and I obviously, on the bucket list, was always to go to an Old Firm game. I've been with the same agent since I was 18, 19, Struan Marshall, who is a big Rangers fan, and he's obviously Scottish born. So I heard a lot of stories, and you hear him talking about the size of the clubs and the size of the Old Firm and what it would be like if they managed to get down south and become part of the Premier League. Everyone speaks about it and has done for many years. So I wanted to come up and sample it for myself, and I went to old firms at Celtic Park, I went to old firms at Rangers. So in terms of the magnitude of an old firm game and the size of the clubs and the support and the noise and the atmosphere, I was well aware of it before I took the job. But, you know, everyone who loves football and is involved in it, you don't realise until you're actually in a certain position that you feel the real intensity of a club, the demands of a club, the expectation, obviously sitting down with the board, with the chairman and the directors, and you really talk about the values of the club and what it stands for. You speak to previous managers. I obviously have had many conversations with Graham Souness, with Walter Smith, people who've worked here before, ex-players who've been here and represented the club. This club will go toe-to-toe with any club in Britain in terms of size and following, and also in terms of the demands from the club, because We played at a club, Robbie, where a draw's a disaster, a draw's a defeat in many ways, and it's exactly the same here representing Rangers. It's not acceptable to draw a football match, and so I knew what I was signing up for. I knew what I came into, and that's what I missed really when I stopped playing. I missed that intensity and that responsibility of the daily routine, and I've got it now for sure. It's very similar in terms of the demands here at Rangers as it was as a player at Liverpool.
So obviously, Steve, so I know what type of player you was, and are you that type of manager as well, which is obviously it is that win at all costs, and it's because you've been brought up. I mean, you just mentioned it yourself about obviously if you draw, that's classed as a defeat because you're that ingrained in winning anyway. So how are you when you do get beat? I know you haven't had many of them this season, but
I think from a personal point of view, obviously you early on in the questions you mentioned about how have I evolved and how have I tried to grow in this role and stuff, and that's one area that I've tried to focus a lot on in terms of being more balanced. At times I've got myself a little bit too down at times I've got myself up too much, but that's what type of person I am. I do try and live the emotions. I do try and be authentic. I try to play that way and play on the edge, so I don't want to change too much, but I think in this role, without to grow into and get better at, is being balanced around results, because it's important that you don't sometimes show the players or people around the club how you're feeling all the time. So after a defeat or a draw, if it doesn't feel good and everyone's feeling bad about themselves, I can't be sulking around the place and show that on my face and my behaviour. I've got to, try and play a different game than most at the club, and try and move on to the next challenge as quick as we can and try and stay in the most balanced place that I can be in.
How have you, Stephen, implemented and how do you cultivate a winning mentality? It's well documented. Celtic 9 in a row. Rangers have been on their knees as a football club in recent years. You've come in there. You've had to change a lot of players. You brought in a lot of your players. How do you go about resetting the culture? Talk us through that process as a football manager.
Well, I think first and foremost, you're right what you say. It is a process. I think you've got to understand that was not we were going to change overnight or in weeks and months. I think the key to all this was the conversations I had with the chairman and the board and the managing director to say, look, let's be realistic. Where are we as a club? Where is the club at? How big's the gap? What's it going to take to bridge the gap? How long have I got to bridge the gap? Is this going to be a case of coming in and the first bit of pressure or the first challenge or the first bump in the road, are people going to be knee-jerk and be rash in terms of decisions? Or does everyone understand that it's going to be a process, it's going to take time, we're going to need a certain amount of windows, there's going to have to be personnel change? Because for me, a culture is about people who you recruit, people who you keep, people who are prepared to change, people who are prepared to reset and share the challenge and the journey with you. And that's what we've tried to do. We've tried to look at all them different departments. But the key to it all for me has been the backing of the board and the chairman, because they've been true to the word. And when we have had a bit of a rough spell or a rough patch, I've had nothing but 100% backing. The majority of what I've asked for, if not everything that I've asked for in terms of trying to change personnel and being backed. Obviously, when we're after a certain player for a certain role, there is restrictions in terms of how much you can spend and how much you can go on the wages. But in the main, I've had fantastic backing and support, and that's certainly played a massive part in getting us to where we are today.
Steve, you've spoken in the past about not really identifying with one particular philosophy. Why is that? And obviously, what is your message to the players with that? Do you just sign players because they're great players, or do you want players to come in and fit into a system that you want to play, or do you fit the players around that system?
Yeah, I think in terms of recruitment, we obviously have player profiles for each role within how we play, and we've obviously favoured a certain system over the other systems, but we have tried to adapt and change within game, or if we come up against a certain opponent, we change. I get asked this question a lot, and in terms of philosophy, I think what's important for me is to not nail myself to one philosophy and make a liar out of myself, because I think it all depends on what your job is, where you're working, what league you're working in. So, for example, this was my first job at Rangers. If, for example, my philosophy was a low block, hard to play against, and we sit back and we soak it up and play on the counter. That doesn't work in every game. So for me, a philosophy, we have a culture and we have a set of non-negotiables, and everyone lives by them. And obviously in my head, I want to play a certain way, which is to have a really tough team to play against, really aggressive team, really organised. We move around the pitch together and we own the pitch. And obviously you want to play in a style where the fans get entertained and you score goals and you're creative and all this. That's how you see it in your head. But what happens if you're playing a team, for example, like Porto or Benfica, who've got more expensive players than you, players with more experience, players who, you know, maybe player for player, are operating on a different level than you. You know, I can't go and approach that game the way I'd approach, for example, a game at home against a team at the bottom of the league in the SPL. So it's having a philosophy and a way of playing and how you want it to look, but also being able to adapt from game to game to what that game needs.
Can I ask, Steve, you've obviously played under so many great managers. You go through the list, similar to Rob. You look at Gerard Houllier, you look at Rafa Benitez, Brendan Rodgers as well. If you were to take all those managers, Fabio Capello, Sven-Göran Eriksson from an England perspective, who's the manager that had the biggest impact on you?
As a player? As a player, Rafa Benitez, without a shadow of a doubt. I think Houllier was that father figure for me when I first came into the team, and he helped obviously sort of change the profile of me in terms of size and being able to cope with the demands. He introduced me to being an elite player in terms of your standards on and off the pitch, and he gave me my opportunity. So he played a major role at the beginning, and he held me hand through the stages where you're raw and you're trying to find yourself as a player. Rafa sort of took me game from a tactical and technical point of view to the next level, i.e. learned me what it means to play in part of a team, tactics, to be in a low block, to slide, to be aggressive, to be responsible in your position. He also changed my role. He learned me how to play the game with me back to goal, i.e. being a number 10 behind a number 9. So I'd say them two, from a Liverpool point of view, played the biggest part. In terms of management, I've tried to be a sponge and steal and learn all different things from all the managers I've played for. You know, not just, you know, you look at Houllier and Benitez, they were really compact managers, hard to play against. Roy Hodgson, the same. Capello, very similar, where it's about your organisation and your shape. And I've tapped into loads of that education throughout this Rangers journey, especially in Europe and the top games that we play domestically. At the same time, I've stole stuff from Brendan Rodgers, from other managers, Sven-Göran Eriksson, them type of people, in terms of the style, how it looks, in terms of playing through the lines, building from the back. And I think it's important to be yourself when you're in these roles and do it your way. But I've worked with top managers and top coaches, so I'd be a fool not to try and steal and use their expertise as well for my benefit.
Steve, does man management play a huge part of your role as well?
Massive.
Would you say, because I'm a big believer in man management more than anything. So you've just mentioned that the likes of Rafa, the likes of Gerard Houllier, who technically and tactically were as good as anyone I've ever seen. But like the man management was not superb, but I enjoyed playing managers who used to sort of take you under wing and get you to go out there and express yourself that little bit more.
Yeah, I think Houllier was really skilled. He knew when to provoke, but when also to put his arm around you. And I think he was a bit more forceful with the more experienced players, i.e. yourself and Paul Ince, and he was probably a bit more firmer with you guys. I got a lot more man management off Houllier, probably because of my age.
Yeah.
And he obviously seen me at an age where he can have a big impact on me. I think with some managers, they're clever because they put other people around them to help them with the man management, the good cop, bad cop situation. For me, man management's not just being nice to a player all the time and giving him hugs and telling him he's great and blowing smoke. That's not man management for me. For me, it's about being honest and building that relationship and having that respect and knowing when to provoke a player and when a player needs his arm around them. Because at the end of the day, they're all human. They're all different. They've all got a different role to play in terms of contributing towards the team. And as a manager, it's about getting to know them players, what makes them tick, what provokes them. When did they need some love? When did they need a little bit of a, me to you, eye contact to say, come on, I need a bit more. And it's just trying to get them relationships right throughout your team and your squad. If you do, you normally get a healthy culture around the place.
I speak to a lot of Rangers fans, Stephen, and still there's a bit of I guess there's a bit of a kind of uncertainty around you in the sense that not many people can pigeon you into what kind of manager you are. Are you a tracksuit, whistle in mouth on a Monday to Friday? Are you someone that likes to step back? And I always reference Brendan Rodgers, it was when he was over here in Dubai. He said the best piece of advice he's ever been given was from Sir Alex. He said the sooner you can get your coaching staff to understand what you want, exactly what you want, and take a step back, the sooner you can really get to work in the managerial job. Is that a philosophy? Is that an idea that resonates with you?
I think there's a few things that are important to discuss here. Obviously, when you're taking a job, it's important you put the right people around you in terms to complement your skill set. You've got to self-analyse yourself. Where are you at? What are you good at? What's your skill set? And then work out what you need around you to make a really effective and a good coaching team. I believe I've got that here. In terms of taking a back step, I'm not ready to take a back step. I think when you're more experienced and you've maybe been in the role for many, many years, maybe with age, you feel like that's the right decision. What I'll never do is try and do someone else's job better than them who's better than me at doing that job. So, for example, I'd been working on a coaching team behind the scenes when I was the manager of Liverpool's under-18s and 19s for some time. People wouldn't believe how close I was watching certain people to take with me when the opportunity eventually came. Now, I haven't had the luxury of retiring early from the game or not being a player in terms of having that pitch time and to really become a coach who's coached for 20 years, i.e. a Brendan Rodgers, a Mourinho, a Michael Beale, who's my first team coach here. Now, it'd take me 15, 20 years to get as good as Michael Beale as an on-pitch coach to deliver sessions on a daily basis. So I let Mick be Mick Beale because he's the expert, he's got the skill set. But what I do is I make sure I'm here for every session. I make sure I'm in the middle of every session. I make sure I step in if I feel like I need to step in. If I need to take a part of the session, I'll take part of the session. I'm always around the team shape, how I want it to look in possession, out of possession. But what I won't do is overtake everyone and stand on people's toes. And then the players, by the time Saturday 3 o'clock comes, they're sick of my voice, they're sick of my face. And after 6 months, no players want to play for you. So it's that understanding what are my skill sets? How does that work in the weekly routine and schedule? And where does everyone else fit around that to make sure that we've got the right pieces in the right places? And I must say, my staff have been incredible for me. They've been here every single session. They've lived the journey with me. I've got total belief and confidence in them. And I see this as a relationship and a group for a long time, if that's what they want as well. But for me as a manager, I never want to step on anyone's toes and do their job or try and do their job better than them if they're better than me at doing it.
I totally agree with that, Steve, because I'm a bit less similar to that to myself, actually. I have obviously my coach over here who I let him sort of run all the sessions and I come in and butt in when I need to. But I
always felt, Robbie, as a manager, that was really effective for me. So, you know, I liked managers like Rafa. Rafa didn't do it all. Houllier didn't do it all. But when they did, it was like, oh, wow, you know, this is the important part of the week. This is the information, the vital information that we need to preparation for the game. I think some managers that try and do, you know, the warm-ups, the rondos, the possessions, the running, blah, 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 eventually you end up getting sick and tired of the voice. And, you know, that's when they can become a little bit stale.
Yeah, I agree with that. Steve, can I take you back to obviously when you were a player at Liverpool? So everyone always goes on about, you know, how good of a player you was and obviously what you've achieved and what you've won and what you've achieved in a Liverpool shirt. Now everyone always mentions like Istanbul and 2005. Is that your greatest achievement in terms of football?
Yeah, I think it's the most popular in terms of, you know, obviously winning the Champions League is a unique moment, especially as captain coming from Liverpool, being the local lad. It's obviously one of the most favourite moments in my career, without a doubt. But I think when you look back at it all and you analyse it all, obviously my debut was one of the biggest days in my life. You know, I'd sat on the Kop, I'd been on the main stand, I'd watched you for many, many years. When I first walked into the dressing room at Melwood was a big day. You know, there's tons and tons of massive moments and pivotal moments throughout your career. It's not just about Istanbul, but I think a lot of people obviously put the connection together because it was the highlight of my career, if you like.
Yeah, Stephen, the reason I'm asking you that is because when I think of you, and as much as look, I know you're an unbelievable player, that Champions League final doesn't really resonate with me, because I resonate the 2006 FA Cup final.
Yeah.
Because I think what you'd done in that game was just, I mean, it was proper Roy the Rovers. I mean, for everyone who doesn't know, Stephen scored a last-minute equaliser from about 35 yards, and I honestly don't think anyone else could have done that. And that was you grabbing a team, i.e. what you did the year before in the Champions League final. That was you grabbing a team who were dead on the feet, everyone was shattered, and then you just came alive in the last minute and scored this unbelievable goal. And I love that more than the Champions League final.
I think if you're talking about a 90-minute performance, what's your favourite performance when, for example, it just happened, and it's difficult to describe because you know yourself, Robbie, when you play at that level where you've played well, it's almost like on autopilot. So if you look at the 2006 performance, that's probably one of my, if not the best performance over 90 minutes. That was probably the performance that shocked myself when you don't even realise you've got that in your locker, to be honest. But obviously, the first half in Istanbul, didn't get a kick, chasing shadows. You're up against that diamond in midfield. You can't get near them. I got spun by Kaká for one of the goals, the Crespo one, the little dink. A lot of things went wrong in Istanbul for me from a personal point of view. Me and the team, we were nowhere near it in the first half. But it's about the outcome. And if you're talking about outcomes and, worldwide audiences, obviously Istanbul and the Champions League has a much world audience rather than just an FA Cup final, even though the FA Cup final is massive to us, especially here in England. So I think it comes down to the magnitude of the game and the outcome of the game. So Istanbul will always be the biggest. But if you're talking about a 90-minute performance, 2006 was much better for sure.
I've got to take you back there, Stephen. 2005. It's a question you've had probably a million times, but I want to hear it from you. I want to transport you back there. You've said you've had a nightmare of an opening 45. You're 3-0 down, for goodness sake. Where are you mentally at that point? Because the Roy of the Rover stuff that Rob talks about, you're going into that dressing room. Rafa, well documented, the change, the little alteration he makes with Didi coming on. Take us back there. What was said amongst the players in order to inspire that second half performance?
Well, I think first and foremost, in this situation, for me personally, a bit of fear has kicked in. A bit of fear of embarrassment, of failure, of not getting out of this game or this time, what you're prepared for and what you'd put into it. So there's a bit of fear kicking in from a personal point of view. You felt like you'd let everyone down. Now, when you go into a dressing room, you've got a group of men who are all emotional at that moment. They're all flat, they're all down, they're full of regret. So that's basically painting the picture of the initial first couple of minutes of the session. Rafa asked us to rest and be calm. Most managers give you a couple of minutes to gather your thoughts. Players are speaking to each other, but we'd had a couple of injuries and a couple of knocks as well. So to describe the first few minutes, it was chaos. It was chaos emotionally. And we obviously, if we were true to ourselves, thought it was over and the game was gone and dead and buried. But a few things stick in my mind, a bit of fear kicking in, a bit of hurt, a bit of pain, and obviously realising that the fans were still with us, which is quite unusual. The Liverpool fans are fantastic, but throughout my career, I've never known the Liverpool fans to still be with us when we've been 3-0 down. So if that was at Anfield, for example, or Goodison or Old Trafford or Stamford Bridge, if you're 3-0 down at half-time, they'd let you know about it. But I think there was an appreciation of the journey, that we were punching above our weight, that on paper, AC Milan were the favourites for the game. And sometimes in football, you've got to be honest and go, well, we were outclassed and outplayed. And that's the way it was at half-time. Rafa got calm. He spoke extremely well. He had his moments and he'd done his little changes tactically. He made a big emphasis on trying to get the next goal. And he reminded us about the fans and that type of stuff. And then, people are off doing bits and bobs. And then the last 30 seconds, 45 seconds before we went out, as captain, I felt like it was my time and my moment to say the last couple of things in terms of a rally cry, to play for a bit of pride, do what we can to get back in the game. And, if we are going to get beat, let's leave a mark on them. Let's let's not have it how it was for the first half. We were too passive, we weren't organised enough, and we were outclassed.
Steve, you've just obviously mentioned there. You mentioned before about obviously the 2006 where you won that game, eventually winning it. That game against Milan, you're getting spun for Pirlo for one of the goals. I mean, Paul Konchesky is not going to spin you for a goal against.
He still says he means that. He still says he means that, Conch. Great finish, by the way.
It was, to be fair. But Steve, just going back to obviously your Liverpool days again. So when you have played with some unbelievable players. But so you think of the 07-08 with Torres, and then you think of 2013-14 with Luis Suarez. Compare the contrast of those players, and bit of an horrible question is if you could pick one of them just to play with for the rest of your career, who would it have been?
Yeah, I'll come to that last bit of the question, and I will put my neck on the line and pick one. But I think with strikers, if you look at my journey throughout from say 98 to the year I left, I played with some magnificent strikers. I played with you, obviously. You'd had your peak. You'd had your peak before I came in.
Steady on, fella.
You'd had your knee injury. But obviously, I was a season ticket holder from the age of 18 to 23 with you, and without blowing smoke, obviously that is world-class level. Then I came into Michael Owen, for example, who, from when he scored the goal with England, I played with Michael Owen in his peak years as well. And as a midfielder, he was a dream for me, wanting to play balls in behind. He was very quick. He had that blistering pace, and he could finish as well when he got in. After that, then I comes into the Torreses of this world. Now, the reason I always talk about Torres and Suarez is because I felt like I was in my prime at that time. So I played with you when I was very young. I was still raw. I was still developing. I played with Michael Owen where I was a little bit further on, but I still didn't feel like I was in my peak years. I was still getting a few injury niggles and, still finding me feet and my profile, if you like. But I bumped into Torres and Suarez at a perfect time. More Torres, really, because I'm in the peak years. You're talking around about that 2006, 7 and 8 years where I felt like, I could go against anyone on the pitch. It didn't matter who it was. Vieira, Scholes, Lampard, blah, blah, all world-class top players. But I felt like I could face anyone at that time. I felt like I was in my peak. So I always go back to Torres and Suarez because they're my best memories of how I felt from a personal point of view. But if you look at Fowler, Owen, Torres, Suarez, Sturridge, even Coutinho to a certain extent, playing with that level of player as a midfielder is an easy job for me because that is top class world level. I'm not saying that because I'm on this podcast with you. I've said it many times before. But I've got a regret with you is that I never played with you from 18 to 23. I never played with Michael Owen longer prior to the Leeds injury. I never played for Torres long enough because he went to Chelsea and broke my heart. And I probably come into Suarez as I'm just coming out of my peak years, even though I really enjoyed that relationship. So all strikers are different. They've all got different styles and different qualities. But all of them names were a dream for me because the movement, the hunger to score goals, the relationship they tried to have with me in terms of being on the same wavelength. So it's very difficult to pick one. But I'd say if you'd ask me who was the best player on a daily basis consistently, I'd say Suarez is an animal out of all them. But my best years were alongside Torres in terms of how I felt.
You said there, Stephen, it broke your heart. I don't know if that was tongue-in-cheek or not, but when you got news that Liverpool had made the decision to sell him, was it genuinely like that? Were you absolutely gutted?
Really, really gutted, yeah. Obviously, we're working so hard at this point to try and get as close as we can and close the gap and challenge. And, at Liverpool around that time, you always felt like you were taking huge strides and getting closer and progressing really well. And then at a really key time and a key moment for the team and the group, a big player gets took away from that, and it takes time to recover from that. And, my relationship with Torres, I was getting a lot of goals at that time. I was in my peak. I was feeling fantastic. Listen, I understand everyone's situation is different. People have different dreams and different paths, and not everyone's a local lad who loves the club. I appreciate and respect all that, but at the same time, it still hurts when someone leaves the club. I've told Fernando that. I tried to get him to stay. I told his agent the same. But they made a decision, and that decision was out of my hands. But yeah, it hurt very bad.
See that, Stephen? You actually picked up the phone to Fernando and his agent to say, don't do this. Stay, we'll win stuff here.
I didn't have to pick the phone up. They were both at Melwood.
That is brilliant. That is great insight.
Steve, just to go back there. So, before we asked you that question, I actually didn't want you to bring, because I knew the answer there straight away, but I didn't want to get mentioned in them because I didn't want to let myself down. So when I said who's the best player you've ever played with, striker, I only said Suarez or Torres. So just take me out of that equation, Steve. I don't want to look bad, say, Well,
what I'm saying to you is, for example, if your 18 to 23 form met my peak years, I'd quite be excited by that. For example, you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
we could have been like Rushy and Kenny, couldn't we?
Well, I played with Sturridge, for example. Sturridge would have been obviously in his peak years, but I'm 33, 34, so I can't get box to box. I can't run off him anymore. I'm more dropping back into a number 6 and more of a playmaker from deep type role. And Daniel Sturridge is so talented, unbelievably talented. But, his career was at a different stage to mine. And I think with a midfielder and a striker, if you can get that when they're both in the peak years, that's when you have your best memories. So, for example, Steve McManaman would pick you, for example, because you were both in your peak. You're getting 30 plus goals a season. He's getting double figures from midfield. You can see that chemistry, that relationship. That's no different to me and Torres, but at a different stage. And I think that's very important when you're talking about an attacking midfielder and a number 9. It's about that relationship.
Well, that's what's the relationship. We could have been like the Kenny and Rushy of the modern day era, couldn't we? I mean, obviously without the big nose and the moustache. They
definitely had the big noses.
No. Steve, before you mentioned obviously some of the players that you played against, like the Vieira, Keane, Scholes, Lampard. Who was, in your opinion, the best or the toughest opponent you played with against? Sorry, out of those names.
You never mentioned Zidane there, or Guardiola, or Riquelme, or.
I'm talking Premier League, Steve.
Yeah, Premier League. Okay, well, look, you're talking about all of them are world class in their own right, all very different, all got different attributes, and you obviously had to adapt your game depending on which one of them you were playing against. I'd rather play against Vieira and Keane, for example, because they're going to be in front of you. For example, the top midfielders, really strong, work hard and try and kill you with the pass, and Vieira to try and run past you now and again. But for me, the most dangerous midfielders are the ones that run off your shoulder and run into the box. So you always have to be on your guard even more when you played against Scholes and Lampard, but they're different types of midfielder. Very difficult to pick one out of them because Lampard's a goal-scorer midfielder whose timing was incredible. Paul Scholes could run a game and was so clever and could outplay you and could go on your blind side as well and score from the edge of the box a lot, same as Frank. But Vieira and Keane played most of the game in front of you, and they used to try and run a game by dictating the pace of the game, the speed, and they'd try and lead and run a game and manage a game within the game. So they're all very different. They're all top class. But I think if you play for Liverpool for that length of time that I did, there's many more that you can mention as well who've caused me problems over the years.
Steve, I want to, and it's an opinion. So sport and football's all about opinion. We had Joey Barton on the pod a couple of weeks ago, and he said that in his opinion, you were head and shoulders above the lot. He said that you're head and shoulders above the current Liverpool midfielders, and isn't it the kind of weird twist of fate that they are the ones, and it's obvious who they are, that are celebrating a Premier League title. You never climbed that Everest, and I wonder on that. He's saying you're head and shoulders above that. How is there a bit of jealousy there? How do you view yourself in that regard? Because of course it was the one that was missing of all of what you won, and yet the Milners, the Hendersons, not to be disrespectful at all, but they're celebrating a league title.
Yeah, listen, I don't think jealousy is the right word. I'm not a jealous person in general, away from football. I've never been a jealous player throughout my career. So jealousy, I've never ever felt jealous towards a current group of players or a group of players that were before my time. It wasn't to be for me. I tried everything I could. I pushed as hard as I could. I got extremely close and had obviously a real low moment during the back end of that season that I don't really like talking about, but it obviously comes up from time to time, but it gets headlines and I want to move on from that. But I'm absolutely proud being a Liverpool fan now that the team have gone and won the Premier League. I knew it was only going to be a matter of time. I think it's the best Liverpool team I've watched or been involved in since the teams of the 80s and them type of eras. I'm not a jealous person at all. I'm absolutely delighted for Jordan Henderson. I know what he's put into it himself. I played with him. I know the guy. I know the man. I know the player. There was no one happier than me when I seen Liverpool win that Premier League. But I'm sitting here now wishing that I had one myself and that my journey went slightly different at certain times, or we could have attracted a few more better players at certain times when we were close, or a certain player didn't leave. So I have got a couple of regrets in terms of my own what I achieved when it comes down to the Premier League. But jealousy and disappointment and all that, them type of words, I don't really relate to them, to be honest.
Good answer. Steve, you mentioned obviously Torres was probably the best striker that you played with. So, in 2013, where it's probably the most fun I've enjoyed watching the Liverpool sides, because obviously the games that you won, and the joy and the enjoyment from every single player was an absolute joy to watch. Now, obviously finishing second in 2007 and 8 and finishing second in 2013-14, what was your favourite team to play in out of those two sides?
I was in my best years in the early one under Rafa, but it never ever felt like we were close or in a title race for real back then. I think it was 08-09 was the second time we finished second. We never really got in front or really felt like we were the favourites at any point. It always felt like we were chasing and catching, and we had a small outside chance. I think in 13-14, we had such an exciting team. Brendan had us playing incredible football. His man management skills were really good, and we were pushing incredibly hard, and we were the favourites at the time. We were playing the best football. We were the most aggressive team. Everything was going for us. And then obviously that moment derailed us, if you like, or was the beginning of the derailment. So it was probably the 13-14 was a better team and had a more realistic chance of winning it for sure. Because in 2008-09, we didn't feel like we were ever going to get close enough. We were always like chasing the team above.
Okay, stay as well. And I mean, forgive me for bringing this up, and I wanted to obviously bring up the 2013 season because obviously everyone always mentions to slip with yourself. And to be honest, and I'll tell you the reason why it does me head in. But that year, do you honestly remember everything about that year in terms of yourself and Man City? Do you know
I've never looked back on the season as a whole. I've got vague memories. I'm not like a Cara that is like a stat only remembers every pass and every decision and yellow card and throwing and corner. I haven't really allowed myself to go back there. I'm not someone who really looks back that much. The memory will always be there. I'm better now, for example, dealing with it than I was in the straight aftermath because it was really raw. I don't blame myself for the outcome of the whole season because the moment was actually cruel and something that I couldn't control. It wasn't a bad bit of play. It wasn't something that I got wrong. I didn't let my teammates down or the game plan down or anything. It was just an unlucky moment, but it was such a big moment. So I have to respect that. And I'm always someone who is firm on myself in terms of responsibility and accountability. So I'd always take it on the chin. If it does get mentioned or people do go to it, I'll always front it up and accept it. But I've been around the game since I was fucking 14 years of age. Sorry for the language, 14 years of age. I know to achieve something over 38 games, there's a lot of things that happen good and bad along the journey. I get that, but that won't take away or underplay that moment. Yeah, I've accepted it and I've took accountability for it.
Right, Steve, the reason I want to bring her up, right, is because, right, people go on about Liverpool saying, not you, but Liverpool bottled the league that year. Now, I know for a fact he never, because I've studied that year, right, and Liverpool lost 1 out of the last 19 games, right, incredible, right. Man City lost 2 out of the last 24, but no one ever mentions Chelsea, Chelsea finished 3rd on 82 points, right, so Chelsea lost against Sunderland the week before they beat us 2-0 at Anfield, where Azpilicueta slipped and gave away a penalty. And you probably remember Barini scored a penalty,
Yeah.
And so they won that game. So they lost the league, Chelsea, by 4 points. So the game before they beat Liverpool, they lost at home to Sunderland, and the game after Liverpool, they drew at home to Norwich. So the game against Sunderland was the first time they'd lost at Stamford Bridge in 78 games, and they lost the league by 4 points. And it always sort of grates me a little bit, because Chelsea, I think, were a team that bottled the Premier League that year. They lost 3 out of the last 9 games. And no one ever meant.
You make me feel better here. Can we just carry on? Can I add a bit more from you?
That's all I want to, because it actually does matter. It's because people have a go at you for slipping because of who you are and what you've achieved.
Listen, look, that's fine. If people want that to be the go-to moment and the memory, I'm fine with that. The people that know the game and were involved and see the game from the first game to the last, obviously it'll be different type of education. But if people want that to be the go-to moment, I'm all right with that.
Well, Steve, I want everyone to sing about Azpilicueta slipping the week before, because Chelsea lost the league. No, I do, because you've had it for years, and I don't want them to sing about you because you're an unbelievable player. No, listen, you don't deserve it.
Listen, the songs, the names and that doesn't hurt me. I've had more stick than that. Don't worry about that.
You've had more stick in the dressing room, to be fair. Some of the club I used to wear. But that was what I was getting to, Steve, to be honest. So you probably haven't looked into it, but Chelsea lost 3 out of the last 9 games. And no one ever mentions it.
I think every player who plays at the top has highs and lows, and has fantastic memories that they remember and cherish, and some that they don't want to talk about or they're not comfortable talking about. But I'm not someone who would try and make myself feel better or put myself in a better position by saying, "Oh, well, Azpilicueta slipped," or the Chelsea fans sing about that me and point to when John said. I'll just say, yeah, okay, that was me. I done that. That's on me. I'll take it. I'm responsible for that. If that makes other people feel better by pointing fingers at me or singing about me, good for them. I'm not really that bothered. I don't lose any sleep over that type of stuff, to be honest.
Right, Steve, obviously we're aware of your time, and I know you're busy, but I think before you go, right, we mentioned before about your greatest achievement. Obviously Champions League, win FA Cups. Will your greatest achievement come at the end of the season?
I think it'll be right up there alongside it, just because of the work I've had to put in here, the sacrifice, not being with my family much, the size and the magnitude of the challenge that we took on, the changes we've had to make. I think the feeling, especially because of how most of my good moments and highlights came at the beginning and the middle stage of my career. I obviously had a fantastic memory lifting a cup for Kenny in 2012. But the last few years of my Liverpool thing, because of the 2013-14 season, and then obviously leaving in a year when I was offered a year, and I obviously regret that a little bit, not staying and signing that year. It was tough at first for me to not be the Liverpool captain anymore. I loved it. I loved it that much. I used to love going in every day. I loved my routine. I didn't ever want it to go at any age. I'd done it till I was 99, 100 years of age. You know the feeling. So then to get back to having this moment that could be alongside all the highlights of my career, I think it'll feel really good if and when we do it. But there's still a lot of hard work to do. There's still big hurdles to get over, and I'd never disrespect the challenge or get carried away before it was here.
I thought that would be your answer, Steve. I thought that would be your answer. We can't get you. Can't pin you down. I couldn't pin you down in Dubai a year ago, and we're not going to pin you down now. But listen, Stephen, bless you. The honesty that you've shown in this past 45 minutes, we appreciate it a great deal, my man.
Top man, Steve.
Pleasure, lads. All the best.
See you soon, mate.
Good luck with everything. Cheers.
Good luck.
Mate.
Cheers, lads.